Oi, it's been a hot one, shall we say. So 109 degrees Fahrenheit on the dash today, hence the reason why I'm doing this in shorts and a t-shirt and sandals. Yeah, it's been a real hot one. So I'm actually quite glad I was riding an electric bike today, because if I was on something that had an internal combustion engine in it, I probably would have evaporated on top of the motorcycle. Anyway, onto the Can-Am Pulse and Origin. So very interesting bikes, I gotta say. Like, it's not real often that we get to ride new electric bikes. You know, the last time I think I had to go on one was probably the Zero SRS, and then before that was the Harley or Livewire. And those are pretty different compared to these things. These things are much more of a, I guess, based on commuter riding. Now, we did a full day, and when I say a full day, I mean we did a full day today. Like, we were on the bikes at 8 in the morning, or at 20 past 8, and it's now 10 to 6, and we only got off them about 20 minutes ago. So we've gone through, I think, 3 or 4 full charges on the battery, which it's hard to say with the range on these things, because we're swapping and changing bikes and things like that. Like, the quoted ranges on, you got to be really careful with quoted ranges on electric bikes. You know, you'll be damned if you'll probably get even, and you know, 2/3 of what the manufacturer says that you're going to get. And you know, on average, I think we're about 60 to 70 miles on a charge, and that would give us, you know, a bit of a little bit of freeway riding, but mainly sort of zipping around in town and that kind of stuff. So take the range with a grain of salt. Level 1, level 2 charging, not level 3 DC fast charge. So, you know, if you're gonna, I think it's about an hour to go from sort of 10% to 90%, and then you've got those final 10% takes you a little bit of time. But the ride experience, let's just, you know, forget waffling on, let's talk about the ride experience. Pretty good, but after a while, I definitely gravitated towards the adventure bike. The ergonomics for me on the Pulse are not right. Now, I say not right because I've got long legs, I've got a long torso. That being the Pulse with its very, very low seat height, right there, as you can see, it for me is not real comfortable after, I don't know, give it half an hour. Also, the shape of the seat as well really digs into your legs, so that becomes real uncomfortable after a while. Handling wise, it's not too bad. Electric bikes have a real particular characteristic in their handling. You can't get them really to work unless you're riding something like the Light Fighter, Brian's Light Fighter, shout out to Brian. Unless you're riding something like a Light Fighter race bike, which is designed to kind of mimic the actions of, mimic the actions of a petrol bike. Now, this being the Pulse being as low as it is to the ground means that it's a bit more nimble. The Origin has a really interesting thing. It reminded me very much of the early days of Zeros, in that it's got quite a vague initial turn-in point from, so if you're bolt upright and you get that first, like, you know, say call it 15 to 20% of turning either side, it's kind of got like a bit of a dead spot. It feels really strange. I couldn't figure out if it was the steering geometry, the tires, but one thing that is for sure is, just like old Zeros and those kind of things, you have a lot of weight right up high. You know, so there's, if you look at a standard ICE bike, you know, most of the weight's down near the crankshaft, you got your gearbox, you got all that stuff down there. When you actually look at an internal combustion engine, there's not much weight up top. Yes, you have fuel and that kind of stuff, but with these things, with the batteries, they are, you know, they're a big block of weight, and you can really feel that in the initial stages of turning. That did tend to annoy me a little bit after a while, especially on the adventure bike. Good thing though, we did take the adventure bike off-road into some adventuring, and it actually handles pretty well. Like, I was quite surprised at it, considering I was not flattered at all by the on-road performance or the on-road handling and steering of the adventure bike. Off-road, it's not bad. We had a good little circuit that we could sort of zip around on. going back through the modes, so 5 modes on the adventure bike, and you got 3 on the Pulse. So you've got Off-Road and Off-Road Plus. Went into Off-Road Plus, then basically maxed everything out, full regen, full power, no traction control, no ABS on the rear. Made it a bit of a dirt bike. The rear brake at that point, when you don't have any ABS, is really touchy. So if you just kind of cruising around on a trail and you hit it, like, it'll lock pretty easily. So you got to be a bit mindful of that. Then you're going to use the regen as well, because the regen is pretty strong on these things. It's different levels, 3 different levels of regen. And that actually, now that I think about it on road, was actually one of the more fun things about this bike. Yes, the performance is good, but it's not going to rip your arms out in terms of compared to something like a live wire, things like that. Like, that thing really goes. This thing doesn't go as quick as the live wire, but when you get off the throttle and you do the active regen versus passive regen is just like you just shut the throttle and brake and it'll give you a bit of regen. But when you do the active regen and you like properly do it and you roll the throttle back past its beginning point, it basically acts as like 40 to 50% of your braking. And that's pretty cool. Like, there were heaps of times today on the road where I never touched the brakes at all and just kind of cruised around. You got one gear, just big scooter style. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed that. I love the fact that they've got Apple CarPlay. That's a big tick in my book, because I think BRP, Can-Am have realized that people don't want to have 8 million apps on their phones. They just want to use Apple CarPlay like they do in their car. So, big tick for them, well done. The thing with electric bikes though, electric bikes are a bit of a hard sell. They are very much in the infancy of, I guess, the category. Been around from the early days of zero, but things have moved on quite a lot, but they haven't moved on enough. And at the price you're talking, like, it's a pretty penny for these things. You're probably going to get more non-motorcyclists than motorcyclists, I think, with these bikes. They are tech heavy, they've got a quirkiness to them that certainly no other bike has. Canadian made, Canadian design, Canadian made, so that's cool as well. It's going to be interesting. I'm not convinced that they're going to be big sellers, at least in the short term. Maybe in the long term, yes. They own all the technology. Rotax, who does the batteries, and Rotax is a hugely famous company. So they have the technology. They're getting in at the ground floor on this one. I think it's going to need to be at least 5 to 10 years, really, before they're going to be able to say whether they were a success or not. I can't see them being an overnight success. But, I could be wrong. I hope I am wrong, because it's always nice to see new players back in the game, especially new old players like Can-Am. But yeah, interesting bikes, I've got to say. Not my favorite bikes that I've tested so far this year, but still cool to hop on something different and to see the electric motorcycle space slowly but surely evolving.